Greetings viewers, and welcome back to the next video in the Advanced Techniques series. Today I'm going to cover dry brushing. I think next to washes this is probably one of the quickest, easiest techniques you can do and still add quite a bit of definition to your painting depending on what surface it is or what effect you're actually going for on the specific model. Typically dry brushing is used on something that has, again, a textured surface, something that has basically ridges and little valleys in it, where essentially the way dry brushing works is you get one base coat on the whole thing, whatever the surface is, and then the dry brushing, it just puts color at the top of those ridges. So let's say my hand is the piece of whatever it is that we're painting, and then the in between my fingers here, like the ridges and stuff, and then the top here is where the texture is. If all this is one color, such as black or gray or whatever color it is, and when I'm dry brushing, all I'm doing is applying paint to these top layers. So all these little cracks and crevices here are still going to show whatever color it is. It's kind of a reverse washing technique, whereas the washes would fill in those areas to darken them and run off of the top. Dry brushing just applies paint to the top ridges and leaves everything that's down here colored in. So sometimes washes aren't always effective, or maybe it'll dye these top portions the color you don't want it to be and all you want is this colored. You can use dry brushing to kind of, again, get that effect, and you can use multiple layers of dry brushing to kind of highlight things. So typically on terrain and stuff. I have my Demon Prince here. You should recognize him from the washes video. On his wings I used a bit of dry brushing to get kind of the extra definition I wanted of it, especially when you're painting with a color like black that just kind of absorbs everything. You can't really see any of the peaks and valleys and ridges and stuff in whatever it is you're painting. Dry brushing is a good way to add some color to the top of that without having to go all out, since again it is tough to cover over black to begin with. This way it adds a little bit of detail. So as you can see, these wings were initially painted all black. I didn't paint the bone or the flesh color or anything first. Once this was all black, I went ahead and dry brushed a little bit of gray mixed with some white on here, just to add like a little layer again, so you can see just the tops of it are colored, but then you still have that black color down inside of the ridges and stuff. Same thing on the back here. Some of it's starting to get scraped away with these metal models. The paint rubs off real easy. But for the most part, you can tell what I'm talking about and get a good idea on the texture, and again, a little extra level of detail, especially when you're coloring over something dark like black. But a little quick, easy effect, and again, reverse effect of using washes. Obviously, if I washed over black, again, you're not going to see anything. So that's kind of the reason why I did it that way. So what I've done today, that I'm going to help illustrate the technique that I'm talking about and show you kind of how it's done, I went ahead and taken a small square base. I don't remember what model this came from, doesn't really matter. I went ahead and covered it with glue. I dipped it in some of the small slate stuff from the basing kit, and then whatever little gaps and stuff didn't get filled in by that, I dipped it in the modeling sand stuff, just to get a little bit of texture. So as you can see, it's pretty rocky. There's quite a bit of detail on here. And then I went ahead and primed the whole thing with the Krylon gray primer. So it's already dried now and ready to be dry brushed. So that way I got all that out of the way. There's no reason for you to have to see that when I can easily explain what I did beforehand. So now we've got our completely gray base that's got a whole lot of texture on here. Something you could use this for perhaps might be if you're trying to put bases or even a terrain board or something together where you want it to look like maybe a road, or especially a crumbling road or something like that. This is an excellent technique for that, and for something like this you'd probably use multiple layers of dry brushing. And usually what you'll see when you read like a painting article or something, they'll say, you know, a heavy dry brushing and then a light dry brushing. Again, that's just layers, and all you're doing is going from darkest to lightest. So this is going to be the darkest gray that I'll use for this particular piece. If, again, let's say I was making this some kind of a urban terrain crumbled up road base to put a model on, then that would be the darkest color that I'd want, and then you basically progressively go lighter and lighter from there on top of it, just to add a little bit of definition essentially to the top of the rocks, where again they'd be rubbed away from people walking or vehicles driving on it or whatever the case may be, to lighten it up. And then it's going to add a little bit of highlight and a little bit more detail to the tops of this. So I'm going to go ahead and reset up the camera on this, and then I'll go ahead and get started and show you how you can get to dry brushing your stuff. Alright, we're all set up again. Like I said, dry brushing is very simple, very quick, easy technique. Doesn't require a whole lot of finesse. It's very simple. Like I said, this is going to be the darkest level that I'm working with, so that goes on first. It works out that gray primer is kind of dark. Goes ahead and sets me up, takes away another step of having to maybe base coat this instead of priming it white or black or whatever. And again, you can do this in any color you like. Obviously, dry brushing doesn't have to be done with only gray. It's just easier to illustrate the technique with these specific colors. And again, with the example, let's say some crumbling road or urban terrain setting. So all you're going to need is some kind of flat type brush. These usually work better than like a pointy type brush, because that's more of a precise application. This, we want to kind of cover a wide area with just a little bit of paint. You're going to need a paper towel, or maybe a couple of them, because what we're going to do is I've got my lighter gray shade here. This is Dove Gray from Folk Art. It's number 708 in case you decide you want to follow this same color technique or practice for yourself or whatever. We're going to not water this down, because again, it's called dry brushing for a reason. So we're going to use this straight out of the bottle. It's a little thick, a little gloppy. That's fine. That means it's going to dry better. Putting water in this kind of fights yourself in getting this done properly. So we put it in our paint palette. We're going to dip the brush into the paint, and then what we do is we use this paper towel and just kind of sweep back and forth, and what we're doing is we're knocking off most of the paint from the brush. It's called dry brushing. If you've painted, again, without watering down your paints before, if you get so far after a little while it gets kind of globbed up on the brush and it's not really coming off very well, and you're kind of fighting yourself and you got to add more paint or water it down a little more, that's the effect that we want right now. Because again, all we're doing is we're trying to put paint on the top of the detail. We don't want this whole thing covered. If I wanted this whole thing covered, I could just dunk it in the paint and let it dry. All I want is a very, very thin, to the point where this paint's about to not even come off the brush anymore. That's the point of doing the sweeping motion on the paper towel. And I would recommend practicing on a other piece of something that you're not going to use, or if you have some extra bases laying around, you can do this. Just dip it in some sand or dirt, prime it, have a couple of them set up so you can practice before you actually go on to the real thing where you want to start doing it, so that way you feel more comfortable in the consistency of the paint and when to stop sweeping and actually start applying it to the model. Because again, when I get to the point on the paper towel where I'm like, okay, I need to get to the piece, if I wait too long, by the time I get here, nothing's going to even come off. If I do it too early, I'm going to get too much paint. I'm going to fill in those ridges, and I may as well have just gone ahead and done it like I'm doing a base coat. So it takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of patience. I would, again, recommend getting a couple to practice on before you go for the real thing. Don't just jump in after watching this or trying it once or twice. So make sure you have plenty of paper towels handy, and I'm going to go ahead and speed up just a little bit, get through applying the paint, and then I'll show you what exactly I'm talking about. So we've got our little bit of paint in the palette here, and we're just going to dip it on the end of the brush. And that wasn't even enough. And then we start applying it to the base. Especially when you're going for the textured look on here, you want to kind of turn it a little bit, because if you're only sweeping it one direction, when you go to finish, you'll see it from that way, but if you turn it the other direction, you're not going to have anything. So if you are doing some kind of textured surface like this, you're going to want to make sure you turn it every so often as you put the dry brush effect that you're going for on there, so that way you can see it from all sides. Or even just sweep in opposite directions as you're going across. Doesn't take long, again, depending on how much paint you have on there. You should be able to see that we've got a little bit more definition on here. It's not one solid color. And again, it kind of gives us that reverse wash effect where we've got just the paint on the top here. Now, you can, again, the heavy dry brushing, I can sit here and keep doing this and make sure everything's covered. Then I can go maybe mix this gray with a little bit of white, or even find a lighter gray, or even go for white. And then just, again, very, very few. Instead of making so many passes and covering the whole area, I'll just get a little bit of paint and then kind of swipe it on there just once or twice in a couple different directions and be done with it. That way you've got even more definition built up on top of this. So again, you get that aged, worn look an effect on the rocks or the little textured surface that you're going for. So again, very simple, very easy, especially on such a small scale. If you're doing that on something such as a big 2x2 game board piece, maybe you're putting together a terrain table or something, it's going to take you a little bit longer. You can even do it with a larger brush than this. Obviously, you're going to need a little bit more paint to dunk it in and swipe it off, but you'll still be able to get the same effect, just obviously on a larger scale, and it's going to take you a little bit longer. I don't recommend continually applying this because eventually you're going to get to the point where you're going to cover up or actually get down in those crevices. So once you feel like you've got adequate coverage, again, you can kind of turn it a little bit, look at it, make sure you got it from all sides. If you miss some spots, go back and hit them again. But other than that, again, very simple, very quick, easy technique, adds nice little effect, and you can move on to the next ones and add that to your painting repertoire. If you guys have any more questions, any comments, concerns, anything else you'd like to see, please feel free to post a comment below. Thank you again to all the people that have subscribed. Sorry it's taken me a while to get back to making videos again. Had a lot of stuff going on, so hopefully you found this video useful. Stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to go over wet blending and how to apply that towards painting some power weapons. So hopefully you'll enjoy that, and please stay tuned. Thank you for watching.